and Organics program. You are attending the first of 4 webinar series. This particular webinar is Developing Your Brewery Program, How to Engage with Breweries and Trade Organizations in Your State to Garner Support for Your program. This is something that we have found to be absolutely imperative in getting our program off the ground and continuing to move the program forward with lots of support in our state. And this particular project that we're going to share with you, the benefits are participating are there are 4 webinars that will dig into how to implement your program. We will share all of our materials with you, including our P2 checklist. So when you walk into a brewery, what are you looking for? Our plug and play recommendations report that works directly off of our checklist. So when you walk into a brewery and you conduct a brewery audit, you can basically just take the checklist and check off what you're looking for. And then any of the strategies that are left at the end of the audit that breweries haven't implemented, basically you just do a plug and play recommendations report for them. And then we will also share our Certificate of Achievement Environmental Plan template. And what that is basically standard operating procedures so that equipment is running at the maximum efficiency. The window clings, and also we'll be sharing our branding with you. We'll also be developing 3 case studies that delve into P2 practices that you, the technical assistant provider, has seen when working with breweries, 3 success stories that highlight you, the technical assistance provider, that implements a Green Brewery Certification Program, 6 videos of innovative strategies and state-of-the-art technology that you have seen in the breweries that you have assisted, a GIS map of all of your certified breweries. This will require you to share your breweries with us, their logo, and then we'll put them on a GIS map that you can then share on your website. And then, of course, we will be sharing our Green Brewery Certification branding that has been copyrighted as well. If you want to check out our website that lists all of the information about this project, the link is at the bottom of this screen. And with that, I'm going to introduce our speakers today. We have a great slate of speakers. Noreen Otto is the Executive Director of the Iowa Brewers Guild. Working with Noreen has been an absolute pleasure and delight. I mean, we get a lot done with Noreen, and Noreen gets a lot done with us. But the Guild's primary function is advocating for public policy to support the industry. As such, Noreen monitors the ongoing legislative and policy climate, as well as collaborating with lobbyists and associations. Collaboration with other industry leaders as well as diverse membership is key. Noreen works to build unity in the Iowa brewing community, and she does a fabulous job. And then I'm going to introduce Nick Newgard. He's also going to be speaking. I love Nick's bio. If you just want to read that bio on the slide, talks about how he started as an entrepreneur as a 6-year-old. But his passion for brewing is rooted in people. While his days are often spent in the back crafting new brews, it's the moments shared over a cold pint that give his work meaning. For Nick, it's the personal interactions that make Second State Brewing more than just a place to grab a beer, and I'd have to agree with that. His work is a blend of passion and skill, the result of years of hands-on experience and a love for the craft. Nick believes in collaboration. To him, every brewery in the area brings something special to the table, contributing to a growing community of beer lovers across the Cedar Valley. When he takes a break from brewing to enjoy a drink himself, he gravitates towards the classics, bold malts, rich ambers, and smooth Irish reds. And I can attest, Nick's beer is phenomenal. And then I would like to introduce Joe Bolick. He is the director at the Iowa Waste Reduction Center. And throughout his time at the IWRC, he's contributed to several key initiatives, including the development of several painter training courses, 2 patented virtual reality training systems, and the Iowa Green Brewery Certification Program. Beyond the IWRC, Joe stays actively involved in sustainability efforts through the National Pollution Prevention Roundtable, where he is currently chair, the Iowa Recycling Association, the Iowa Composting Council, and the Iowa Society of Solid Waste Operations, working to make a lasting environmental impact. And so this is our slate of speakers today. And with that, I am going to pass the baton to Noreen. So let's get your, do you have a presentation, Noreen?
I do not. So I
Okay,
apologize.
perfect.
Everyone just have to listen, but I
No,
will
that's
keep this,
great.
I will keep my comments relatively short. I appreciate the nice introduction, Jenny. You started exactly where I was going to start, really talking about partnership and who we are as the Iowa Guilds. So I usually start any kind of presentation explaining what a guild is. The word guild throws people off frequently. We are a trade association. So I represent over 100 breweries and cideries in the state of Iowa. Our association exists to unify brewing professionals, obviously promote Iowa beer, and then advocate for the industry's growth here in the state and beyond. And that includes, as Jenny referenced, particularly in public policy and the legislative side, but also education is really at the heart of what we do at the Brewers Guild. So we frequently, and I say we, when I say we, I'm a team of one, but we work really closely together as a community. I have a great board of directors. And so when I say we, that's who I'm talking about as the guild. We work really hard to bring our members quality resources and quality education as part of the task of elevating our presence in the state and elevating the quality of our product. Part of that is finding people who do the things that we cannot do as a small trade association. So we're really proud to partner with a couple great institutions here in the state. We actually work really closely with the Midwest Wine and Grape Institute at Iowa State University, as well as the Iowa Waste Reduction Center at UNI with Joe and Jenny. And as part of that, obviously, the Iowa Green Brewery Certification Program. I've been in this role for 5 years. And through all 5 of those years, we've been working closely with this team, and it's been fantastic. As I mentioned, we have over 100 brewery and cidery members. We count craft cideries as full members in our association. And I like to tell people that our members are very small. We do not have a brewery that is, I think we may have one now that is in the top 50 in the United States. Most of my members are making less than 500 barrels of beer a year. They are running on teams that are 5 and 10 people. They are entrepreneurs. They are in large cities, but a lot of small towns across the state. And every single one is a manufacturer that has an eye on the bottom line right now. And one of the great things that the Green Brewery Certification Council brings to our industry is that it's substantive and actionable. They bring a level of expertise that myself, as a team of one with a legal background, cannot bring to our members. So we have this resource right in our backyard that we can help act as a conduit to connect great members like Nick at Second State with the team at the Green Brewery Certification. And I have members say they literally came in with a checklist and helped me start on these initiatives. I don't want to speak to it too specifically because I know Nick's going to add some highlights to that. But as a trade association, that gives us another tool in our tool bag that we didn't have to recreate, that we didn't have to build from scratch, and that we know is reliable, substantive, and valuable to our members. And that's really at the heart of what any trade association wants to do for their members. Another important thing is that, as we're sitting here in 2026 and, throughout the early 2000s and the last couple of decades, we've seen a lot of discussion about sustainability and taking green steps. And it's particularly important in the world of brewing because we are significant consumers of water. But I think what we've seen is frequently we get a little bit of greenwashing, where things are labeled or certified, or we speak to that they're environmentally friendly. And that is not the case with this program. This is real substantive items that can be steps that can be taken within a manufacturing space. And the other amazing thing that I tell members when they're asking about this program is not only is this about doing the right thing and sustainability and presenting yourself as a business who's using your resources responsibly, but this comes straight to your bottom line. Not every program is feasible for a tiny business in Tatanka, Iowa, but there's plenty that can be done that's valuable, saves money, and gives you that sustainability that's such an important piece of a modern manufacturing business. So, in short, I'm happy to answer questions or chime in later, but in short, we found such value in this because it provides a resource for our members that we can't provide on our own. It's reliable and actionable, and it's substantive, and provides great support and a great way for our members to hold themselves up to the standard that we want to see for manufacturers in 2026. So we talk a lot about if there's no water, there's no beer, right? And so we want to always make sure in particular that we're taking good care of water, taking good care of our resources, and running great breweries to bring our communities together.
Thank you, Noreen. And just so everyone knows, we'll be taking Q&A via the chat. And we will dig into those after our speakers are done. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Nick Newgard as our next speaker to talk about his experience working with the Green Brewery Certification.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Noreen is much better at these presentations than I am. Obviously, I make beer, not presentations, but I'm happy to give our experience in what we've worked with these guys with the Green Brewery Certification Program over the years. To be perfectly honest, when Joe brought up the Green Brewery Certification Program probably 8 or 9 years ago in our tap room, I've told Joe several times I was very skeptical. I've had a lot of these kinds of things come up before, and they're not always practical, can be idealistic on the way that things get approached. Excuse me. So I was a little bit skeptical, but Joe was able to convince me to give it a go. And I'm very happy that we did. It was a great experience. It's a great program to work with, and the people at the IWRC have been great to work with on it also. So they asked me to talk some of the benefits that we've seen of working with this. Obviously, there's environmental benefits with it all. That's kind of the idea there. There's lots of things for us to be thinking about when we're starting a brewery or running a brewery. And so the environmental side of things can get overlooked pretty easily. There's the little things that you don't think about. There's the big things of, hey, should we use LED lights instead of incandescents or whatever? But the small things of, as Noreen was talking, water usage and how we're dealing with certain things in the manufacturing process that can get overlooked. And those are smaller things that can add up in a big way. So they were able to point out a lot of those smaller ideas that were easily implementable, that can make a big difference for us. Another benefit is the knowledge base that they've got in how to approach these things and options that are out there. Like I said, our job is making beer and serving beer to people. And so we don't always know the options that are out there and the best ways to approach some of these things. So having access to the people that is what they do, that really provides us a benefit, because even if it is that we know the idea is something that we want to do, how to implement that or what options are out there can be a time consuming, can be an expensive process. So having the Green Brewery program really gave us the access to that information, so made it much easier to implement those things. Let's see, what else did I have in my notes here? As a resource, again, answers to questions. Just those things that you don't know that you don't know. It makes a big difference. And there's all of it, obviously the promotional side of things. There is an audience out there, especially in the brewing side of things, that is interested in being environmentally friendly and how businesses are dealing with that. And so just to be frank, from a business perspective, it makes sense to tap into that, and that promotional side of things that the Green Brewery Certification Program brings has been a big benefit. It's a good thing for everybody. The other question that Jenny had sent me was just some recommendations on how to best serve the breweries and what things can be brought there. To go with a lot of what I had said, the benefits, being a resource for those breweries, I think is a big thing, because we've all got a lot of stuff on our plates right now, especially. And as Noreen said, many breweries are very small operations. She said, you're talking a team of 5 or 10, and a lot of us are even less than that. And so wearing a lot of hats and doing a lot of things that way, having somebody that we know when we have an issue that way, that you can reach out and have those answers, again, that I don't have to spend 2 days looking for a solution. People know what it is, and they're there to support that brewing industry. Can be a big thing. Being realistic, that is, as I said at the beginning, is a very important thing to me. Yet there are a lot of more green things that we could do at our brewery, but they're going to cost me thousands of dollars to save $100. And understanding that and presenting that information the way that Joe and Jenny did when they came into our place of, hey, this is an option, but from a financial perspective, it's not going to make sense. There are breweries out there that's they're looking to be as green as possible, and they're going to invest in those things, and that's great. But not all of us have that option all the time. So the realistic approach to things makes a big difference to me, on the acceptance of the program and people wanting to participate, instead of being very idealistic about what needs to be done. Let's see. The other thing, being visible. I think that makes a big difference, and Joe and Jenny have done a great job of that, of being part of the guild, coming to events, showing up at breweries, keeping that personal relationship. Brewing is a very relationship-based business. Even with those of us within the guild, it's knowing people and that personal relationship. And so having that personal relationship and that contact with the people that are in the program, I think it's a very, very important thing also.
Thank you, Nick. That's great things to hear about us. Thank you. And we did not pay him to say those things. Anyway, with that, thank you, Nick Newgard from Second State Brewing. With that, I'm going to pass the baton to Joe. Joe, it's 11:22, so just to keep time, Joe's going to talk a little bit about how we started this program and how we came about some of the checklist information that we did and some of the benefits.
Yes. All right. So I do have a few slides that I'll go ahead and share while we're going through this. I found a nice picture of actually the three of us from earlier this year down at one of the advocacy days and legislative events that the Iowa Brewers Guild hosted in Des Moines earlier this year. And that's kind of one example, I think, that Nick was just talking about, and how just being present, being there, and being an active part of it. And that's kind of one of the things that we do try to do. But I'm going to talk a little bit just about kind of how we were able to start and grow our certification program and get it to a point where something that we're very proud of and and has gotten a little bit of notoriety and success with it. When we first started, Jenny kind of hinted at this when she talked, but we do have the luxury at the Iowa Waste Reduction Center to, we're charged with being the environmental assistance provider to Iowa's small businesses. A lot of that historically has been through compliance assistance efforts, P2 efforts, and various things like that. But about a decade ago, our phone wasn't quite ringing as much as it used to. We weren't necessarily getting the requests for small manufacturers and compliance assistance things, and so we were trying to figure out what can we do to continue to provide value to the state, to the small businesses of the state. And we've had some previous successes with going with industry specific efforts. And so we evaluated a handful of industries, and craft brewing seemed like a natural fit at the time. It was going through massive growth, very resource intense industry, and make a product near and dear to our hearts. So that made it a little bit easier decision to go and kind of run with. But we wanted to be able to provide a service that was something that the industry wanted. So one of the first things we did is we surveyed as many of the existing breweries as we could. At the time, I think there were maybe right around 40 breweries across the state. As Noreen mentioned, now there's over 100. So that was part of that exponential growth that we were seeing at the time. But so we surveyed, we got 17 breweries to respond back, and we asked them all sorts of questions about various environmental things that could be implemented in the brewery, what would be the ease of them to implement it, how impactful those would be. And then through those survey results, and then we conducted 4 kind of unique visits of breweries of varying sizes. And then we kind of took what we learned from that and presented it to the Iowa Brewers Guild, their annual conference every year that they host every year. We presented our idea and just saying, is this something you guys would want after this? And it really turned out, yeah, this was something that they wanted. And timing was really good for us because there were 2 breweries locally that were going through pretty significant expansions from a much smaller, one was actually in a rural community and then was expanding into one of the larger communities in the state and growing significantly bigger. And then another one that we had right here locally that was moving into an old kind of abandoned Wonder Bread factory in town. And while they were going through those expansions, we were launching our program. They reached out to us and wanted and kind of mutually wanted to work together within that. So that helped us right away get a little bit of validity within the industry and who we were trying to reach. But really what we kind of did with that is we focus in 4 primary areas. So we surveyed these breweries, worked with these 2, and then kind of visited 4 of different sizes right away and determined there's kind of 4 areas that we could really focus our efforts on. First one being kind of what, as I mentioned, we do a lot of work with manufacturers across the state historically with compliance assistance, regulatory assistance. And so that's something, there's not nearly as many regulations that a lot of these craft breweries fall under, but it's one of the things, there are a few here in Iowa that they do need to comply with. And chances are they have no clue that they need to comply with them. And so we try to be able to help walk through them if we can find small unit exemptions for some processes and things. We can walk them through how to do no exposure for stormwater and some other things there to help them, find the exemptions or get them to the point where they can easily comply with any applicable regulations. Then we take a look at their overall energy efficiency. That could be from the brewing process, from the tap room to even to outdoor, from lighting to building envelope to water heating and all of those and HVAC systems. Then we kind of look at their overall environmental management. How are they handling, how are they handling solid waste? How are they handling record keeping, standard operating procedures? We provide templates and various things like that. And then obviously the one that Noreen and Nick both mentioned with looking at water, water conservation, water quality. How can we minimize the amount of water that's going to be required for these breweries to continue to operate and function? The way our program really works, the process is when a brewery gets a hold of us or we initiate talks with them, we'll set up a date, we'll go visit them. And then we've developed a checklist based on those survey results that Noreen kind of mentioned, and we walk in with a checklist, and this checklist is something that's been modified for this grant that we'll be able to provide to any of you looking at starting a program as kind of a turnkey effort here in a couple of months. And we go in, we walk through the checklist, we sit down with whoever's championing the effort from the brewery. It could be the owner, could be the head brewer, could be the general manager or something along those lines. And we'll just sit down, we'll go through the checklist with them, we'll walk through the entire process and check everything out through the list. And then we come back to our office and we go through, we compare notes, and then we'll write a recommendations report based on all of the on that audit checklist, various things, and then we'll send that recommendations report back that outlines here's the level that you would be at right now. This is what's required for certification. And here in Iowa, we do have 4 levels of certification. We have bronze, silver, gold, and platinum that we determined was going to be best for our state. And so we'll send them back this recommendations report that this is the current, that basically tells them this is the current level you're at. Here's some things you can do to move up to the next level, and then we'll work with them on how to implement those things to get to the level that they want to achieve. And then once they achieve that level, we certify them. And so then when we certify them, we will go back, we'll provide them with some window clings to put on their business. We'll provide them with some logos that they can use it around with what they want. But then one of the big things we do is we make sure we contact local media. We do a social media push on our social media pages, and we give them, we'll do a little photo shoot and some other things, and we'll really try to brag about that point. I did see a question came up earlier that Noreen kind of answered on how she does help make sure their members know. One of the things that she always does, and that the guild has always done, is when we do certify a new brewery, we send the press release to the guild, and they publish it in their monthly newsletter to let all the other members know that this is another one that's achieved that. So so I think it is a great personalized approach that we do rather than just a link on websites, and that's been really beneficial. The benefits for programs and technical assistance providers to do this is it's fun. This is a craft brewing is a very unique industry. As Nick mentioned when he was talking, they partner together. There's no other industry I've ever worked with where you have competitors that want to work together, or that you would actually see one industry member selling a competitor's product out of their storefront. A guest tap is not necessarily an uncommon thing at a craft brewery. Collaboration beers are very common and regular. We've got some great things that happen in Iowa with collaboration beers that are expanding throughout the state. I know I saw Noreen was sending out emails earlier today about the Yield of Dreams that comes out every year. That's just an incredible collaboration across the state. So this is a very unique and fun industry to work with. And that's one of the real benefits of taking on and starting a brewery program. But the other thing is we're making this very easy. It kind of can expand your portfolio of services that you offer. I don't know a better way to put it, but it's a lot of times what we do as technical assistance providers, we work with manufacturers. It's not always the sexiest work, so to speak. We're making a great impact, but it's not something the general public necessarily always cares about. You start working with breweries and certifying breweries, suddenly the general public does care, and they want to hear these stories, and they want to hear about these things happening at the tap room in the brewery downtown in their small town, and it's a sense of pride, and we can provide these materials to you, through this P2 project that we have going on, so you can kind of tap into that and be a part of that and add a Green Brewery Certification Program to your portfolio. Really helps get your name out as a technical assistance provider and as a program. We've had more recognition, and just kind of general news stories and out there in front of the general public through these efforts than we have. And as you can see right here, we can see our logo on store shelves now, across the state, and that's recognition that we wouldn't have been able to get without having a program like this that we've had some success with. A couple of the things that you can really do to help grow your program, if this is something that you're gonna start, is I know this has been mentioned before, but be involved with the state guild. We're lucky that we have a guild here that's really grown strong. Noreen's leadership's been just fantastic. Her coming in with her law background really made a huge difference in the Iowa Brewers Guild's really stepped up to the next level. But we try to support them in any way we can. Some years we may have the ability to financially help with sponsoring, potentially sponsoring events. But even if we don't, if those finances aren't there, there are other ways that we can work and partner. We're at the university. I know a lot of you in the audience are also at universities. A lot of us have interns and things. One of the things we did with the guild this last year is Noreen needed some help, and we had a graphic design and marketing intern that was working for us that was able to. We just partnered them up together and said, use our intern. She can help you with some of the things you need, and they were able to work together to turn out a great product that was left down at the State House for any lawmakers. There's speaking engagements. We can promote each other. There's the guild involvement's been really great and important. The other thing is, I know Jenny mentioned it, kind of in my intro, but I'm involved in a lot of organizations. Jenny's involved in a lot of organizations. Other members of our staff are involved in a lot of other industry organizations that aren't necessarily beer related at all. But some of us have, positions within these organizations and help because of us developing this program and promoting this program. Now these organizations, they want to have a networking event. A lot of times we can encourage, or they come to us saying, do you know any breweries in this area that you can have an event at? So we're helping promote the businesses too. These individual breweries we work with, and even those that we don't, through these type of efforts, through other industry organizations that may not necessarily be, manufacturing or brewery related, but they are, environmentally related. And so you can kind of bring that audience to the craft brewers as well. When you have great partners that are doing great things, we like to nominate them for awards. There's all sorts of environmental awards and impact awards. And that's been kind of a reciprocal thing. We've been lucky enough to be nominated for some awards by our brewery partners. In the state, it was really an honor to be, selected as an innovation award winner by the Iowa Environmental Council. And that was one of our brewery partners that nominated us for that. But we've also nominated several breweries for other environmental awards, from the Iowa Recycling Association to some of the other, statewide organizations. And then again, some of the other stuff with social media and local media, and being able to use some of those. Breweries have their niche, like Nick said, they make beer and serve beer. Unless they get to a certain size, they probably don't have a PR director or a media relations staff that goes out and about. So, we have access to some of those things, and we can help promote some of their efforts that they're doing. And I think that's one of the reasons we've had some success. And one of the last things I'll kind of leave with is just some of the lessons that we've learned through the years to really help grow, our program. And one of them, this is going to be a tough pill to swallow, but, if you're going to want to really grow and succeed the program, it really doesn't hurt to go visit some of these places, after working hours, and just go have a beer at a brewery. If you're driving through town, stopping by and meeting the people and just having a conversation, supporting their businesses. These are entrepreneurs. Every pint counts. So developing those relationships that way. Figuring out how you can be involved. One of the things with Nick and Second State Brewing being here local in town, they hosted a small little festival where, they'll get 15, 20 craft breweries providing samples. Iowa Public Radio will have some live music going on stage, and we just handle the recycling for them. It's an after hours thing. We have the bins that we can do it and we can bring out, and we just agreed that this is part of something that we should do. It helps locally. It's this, but it also eases the burden for him because he's trying to coordinate all these other things. He doesn't have to worry about where all the cans are going afterwards because we'll just take that off of his plate. And we will have a couple staff volunteer, and then we'll set up a little tent and brag about our program during the festival, along with all the craft breweries that are there. We'll brag about all the ones that we've certified as well, and then we'll make sure all the cans are picked up and recycled properly when it's said and done. And ends up being a very enjoyable evening, and we're trying to do some good out of it, and we're also continuing to develop in those relationships. And just figuring out new ways to partner. That's one of the things that we've tried to really do and promote as well. For instance, there was a year where we hosted the Iowa Waste Reduction Center's advisory committee. We have to have an advisory committee meeting every year. One year we hosted it at Nick's Brewery here in town, just to kind of show off a new distinct location. Is it designed to be a meeting place? No, he very gracious to open his doors, for us, before opening hours. And so we could move some tables around and set it up. And it ended up being a very memorable meeting that everyone really enjoyed being a part of. And it got some people that were coming in from out of town that maybe wouldn't have stopped by or done that into his door. And they could be a repeat customer when they come back now. So it's just figuring out how we can promote and partner in unique and different ways, not just the traditional ways. But the biggest thing that we've really learned is be proactive. Don't be pushy, but reach out to. You've got these relationships developed. Breweries are busy. They're trying to make beer. They're trying to sell beer. They're trying to. Right now, let's be honest. They're trying to survive. It's we've seen the tides change since we started this program, and we were going through a big boom. That big boom is not so booming anymore, and I think it's even more important for a program like ours and for Green Brewery certification type programs now, because we can help them save on their bottom line through implementing these things, and every penny that you can save is a chance to continue to keep operating and growing. And we do try to keep it realistic and sane because, truthfully, we want a business to be sustainable, but if we make recommendations that would put them out of business, there's no way that's sustainable. A true sustainable business has to be profitable in order for that business to continue to sustain. So our recommendations usually try to come in with realistic approaches on how you can continue to move forward. So we're proactive in learning what those are and proactive in promoting them to our clients and partners. And I think with that, I'm pretty much done here, and we can open it up for any questions that anyone has. Please use the Q&A and we will go through some of those.
I just have one thing to toss in there. This project is a series of 4 webinars. And so our second webinar is going to take place June 17th, which is a Wednesday at 11 o'clock. We don't have the link scheduled for it yet. And that particular webinar is going to dig into live recorded video of an on-site brewery audit. And so we're going to really talk about the audit during our next webinar. And if you register for the next webinar and attend, then we will send our materials to you so you can start looking at how to implement your program. So anyway, just had to throw that out there.
Okay, so I see we have a few questions coming in. First one is just with the audit framework, does it address wastewater loading like BOD or any of that, and then reuse of spent grains? I will say yes, we do address reuse of spent grains. And I see that question's coming from Kevin up in Minnesota, and what you've probably seen and what we've seen here in Iowa specifically is a lot of times if a brewery announces it's going to be opening, spent grain is the least of their worries to try to get rid of. There's a farmer knocking at the door right away saying, "What are you doing with your grain? What are you doing?" The real problem is finding consistency. And Nick, you can chime in on this. But finding that taker that will consistently come take on schedule when you need to get rid of it. And then as far as like the wastewater load, Kevin, we really don't address that specific. We address it in a kind of roundabout way. The onus really is on the wastewater treatment facility to bring it to the manufacturer. Um, if there's that. So we always recommend if they do have a treatment agreement or if there's anything in place, they follow it and we can work with them on that. But because at least here in Iowa, those are so locally generated and assigned by the wastewater treatment facility of that locale, we actually don't recommend that a brewery reach out directly unless they think they're going to have a significant impact.
Yes, and
Which
sorry, Joe, but one of the measures we look at is whether or not you filter your wastewater and whether or not you have grease traps on your drains on your floors. So we do address it in that way, and we give points towards having those implemented. And I saw Nick had unmuted. Nick, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say with the spent grain thing, as Joe said, yeah, the biggest challenge there tends to be consistency. What I've always told our people is they've got to be out within 24 hours to give them a little bit of flexibility in there, but at the same time, get it out of our way and out before things start to cause a problem, we'll say. So and the brewing is a very seasonal thing. So our consistency of providing it for some people that want it can be an issue as well for smaller breweries. We're brewing a lot more certain times of the year. So there can be some challenges in there to deal with as well. But it is a great thing for feed and for animals.
This is slightly off topic, but reach out to your state guild. There is a nationwide initiative called Brews to Barns, and we are working both on a federal and state level, a number of state guilds to get a tax credit for donation of spent grain to address this exact issue and to incentivize some consistency. So that's a great one to reach out to your guild. Little plug for the guilds there.
Another question that came in was, how many breweries have we certified and is there a cost? And if not, who paid? So to answer that question, we've certified 34 breweries in Iowa now at this point. We'll say there has been a few that we've certified that are no longer in business anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, we've worked and certified with 34 at this point. Like I mentioned, we do have multiple levels. We have platinum, silver, gold, and bronze. Nick is at a gold level. We do have 5 platinum level breweries across the state, and Nick is only a few points short of that. And honestly, probably next time we go back and do a recertification, he'll be probably right up there. So, but it's that level, and what we're able to do, and we're able to fund this through our core funding to be the small business assistance provider for Iowa environmental assistance, and so we're able to fund the programming and the staff time, through that. There are potential opportunities through P2 programs still to work with small manufacturers, to work in food and beverage, and other things there. And we've seen similar programs be able to fund this through some P2 programs. And then there's also potentially some funding mechanisms through your state's Department of Environmental Quality or Natural Resources or one of those departments too, with the small business assistance side of things. Another one is, I think Jenny asked that, and he may have had to hop off. But Daniel asked if there was a sign up or anything, and by registering for this webinar, we will send out an invitation, and you will, once we have all of the new materials up and ready on the website and launched, we will release that, and you'll be able to access any of those. I have another question came in. Are there any measures where you see a lot of reluctance or resistance, or is it unique to each business? And this is coming from Erica from the Nevada Green Business Network. Jenny, you can take that one.
Okay, so we have seen some resistance in that if a brewery is knowingly violating a regulation, then we won't certify them. So, we have seen some resistance. I'm not going to say the brewery name, but we did see a brewery that was had dug a trench to the wetlands behind their brewery, and a lot of the wastewater was going to the wetlands. And we said, you can't do that. So when we went back the next time, they had just built a large privacy fence, so you could no longer see that they were doing that. So we don't certify breweries like that. There was resistance in that point, but as far as like most breweries are concerned, the vast majority of them, there's no resistance because they call us to be there. They want us to be there, and so they're interested in doing the right thing. That was only one example in 10 years that I've seen any sort of resistance. So, for the most part, we're not there. We're non-regulatory, so we're not going to call the DNR and let them know. But for the most part, no, I would say there's no resistance just because they've asked us to be there.
And I'm going to chime in here too. I was new to the brewing industry when I took this role 5 years ago, and I've heard nothing but gracious comments about Jenny and Joe's expertise. Our members really appreciate their very collaborative and pragmatic approach to these issues. As Nick said, it has to be affordable or it's not realistic for a small manufacturer in our industry. And, as we were talking about these things, I remember there was multiple media requests I got one month about if any of my breweries were going to be implementing large carbon capture systems, right? And that's wonderful and that's aspirational. We have one brewery who it's realistic for them to do. So things like this certification program are just so practical and realistic and pragmatic. And that's what I've heard over and over from our brewery members.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most reluctant people to join us is on this call promoting it right now and talking about how it works. So we've had some, but we've been able to convert them a little bit. And I think a lot of that is through our pragmatic approach and a lot of our background working with manufacturers, working with, so we have a history organizationally of working in, with manufacturers, with people in these roles. And ultimately a brewery is a small manufacturer. And that's kind of always been our wheelhouse client across the state. So I think that helps too.
And
I was just gonna say,
also,
I think it
oh,
makes a big difference on how you approach the breweries. And if you come in trying to tell them, hey, you have to do all this, and if you come in with that regulatory approach, you're going to get a lot more of the pushback. But the IWRC has really been able to come in with that collaboration of how can we help and what can we help you guys do and how can we make everything better. And with that approach, I like I said, my skepticism went away quickly that way.
and this program, this Green Brewery Certification Program, we designed it so it would be the same for a large brewery or a very small brewery. We designed it so that everyone could make progress towards sustainability, and it didn't make it easier for a large brewery with lots of capital to spend on sustainable initiatives versus a smaller brewery. So it is designed that way, and I appreciate Nick saying that a lot because we
And
worked
that
hard to make it
And
that
and
way.
that kind of goes into the next question that's up here. Just speaking to a couple examples that would separate a gold from a platinum brewery. And there are some that would be capital expenses. Not gonna lie, but but not everything is that way. There are some breweries that have been able to implement renewable energy, whether that be through, solar arrays or, geothermal. Those are two options that we do have a couple of breweries that are using that. But we also have, a platinum brewery that doesn't have any of that, but is able through through their operating procedures, through their and through their water reduction initiatives, through their all these other little things that they've implemented in and around their tap room. We one of our platinum breweries that they really got there through water reclamation, water reuse, and then reduction in water, and then also some other things they were doing outside with a pollinator garden, along the entire south side of their brewery and tap house, to reusing different construction materials and various things. And a lot of it is things that a lot of these breweries are already doing. It's just recognizing them for what they are and the sustainable practices that they are. You reuse an old. I mean, how many different pieces of equipment in your brewery, Nick, are reused, repurposed, or just rigged up by you?
A lot of what we did
Mhm.
was that way. Our hot liquor tank, our mash tun, all our tables and bar top and all that stuff is reclaimed, reused equipment, reused stuff that we've turned into extra things that wasn't necessarily even spurred by this, but that went into it, and the recognition for that, and the like I said, that was just kind of the way I do things. But Joe and Jenny really pointed that out to me more so of how we can continue that kind of stuff.
And so, I mean, those are some of the things we see there. And again, there are capital expenses from buying a couple $100,000 infuser. There's another large brewery down in the Des Moines area that's added a calandria onto their boiling tank that cuts their boil time down significantly. So they're able to get through 3 batches through in a day rather than 2, because it cut their boil time down so much. But there are certain things like that. But again, scalability has a lot to do with that. So if you can do that, I would argue a lot of times it's probably more difficult to get to the highest level if you're bigger than if you're smaller, because scale wise, brewing is kind of unique, especially in water consumption. The bigger you get, it's not like you're using less, per capita or whatever water. It actually increases the larger you get because you just have so much more surface area, and so it's so much more difficult to control. You can go in and clean a small kettle pretty easily using minimal water. You ain't doing that to a 60-barrel fermenter. So there's significant differences based on size and scale that can make it actually more difficult sometimes for the larger people, because it's going to be potentially more expensive. Couple more questions. Boy, the questions do just keep coming in. So we have one that just has some challenges getting breweries involved. Any advice on how to get the owners and share? Biggest piece of advice I would be is partner with your guild. They're going to listen to the guild, and Noreen can attest to that.
And I can't overstate, while you read ahead on the questions, Joe, I can't overstate how collaborative this industry is. And so we made a couple points here coming in from a collaboration point of view rather than a regulatory point of view is key. I mean, it's funny, even here in Iowa, our regulators at the Department of Revenue, they attend our socials, they come and spend time. So we really try to cultivate a culture and an atmosphere of collaboration and socializing. I mean, Joe showed those great pictures. They come to our events, and then our members see them as a partner, not as sort of someone else I'm going to pay to come in and tell me what I'm doing wrong. It's much more, this is a tool, this is a educated team who's here to work with you. And generally collaboration goes over really well in the craft brewing. It's one of the best parts of our industry.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Noreen. I would say leverage the people that you have been able to get to work with you, because if they're having a good experience with it, if it's beneficial for them, those other brewery owners are a lot more likely to listen to them, the people that have had the experience, than they are to you, unfortunately. But it's people they know in those relationships. So leverage those experiences that you already have.
Couple other questions, and I know we're getting about up to time here. We have, can the technical assistance provider also be the certifier? Yes, that's what we're working towards with this project is to, create kind of a primary certification criteria, and then we'd be kind of the clearinghouse, so to speak. So we'll have the maps and everything that we can provide you that does that, along with some of the branding and all of that. But it would be up to each state to kind of run their own certification program through that. So, that's what we've done. We are the certifier of this, and that's how it works here in Iowa, and it's um, and I think pretty valuable to a lot of our partners. Another one is there any financial investment required from breweries to participate other than the cost of implementing recommendations? At this time, no. We, as I mentioned, we are able to run this program through, through our core funding services, and if you can find funding there, we're able to offer these services free of charge here in Iowa. And then the last question we have on there is, do we assign points for using local ingredients? Yes, yes, we do. Not always the easiest thing to find local ingredients when making beer here in Iowa, because we don't grow a lot of barley and don't grow a lot of hops or anything there, but a lot of the other ingredients that are used. Nick, can you talk about some of the local stuff that you use in your beers?
Yeah, so kind of anything that we can do locally. If we had a hop farm here in Cedar Falls, unfortunately not anymore, but anything that we could get that way, we would get from them. Everything that we do in general. If there's a local option, cost has to be involved, but there's also benefits to that being local where you don't have the shipping and all that drives the costs up also. So like Joe said, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of barley growing in Iowa. My ag background, I would have loved to. I looked into growing our own and doing some of our own, but unfortunately, it's not always feasible. But anytime that we do have a local option, that we go that way.
And I would give a plug here for cideries. We're in kind of a cider renaissance right now in the United States. We, as I mentioned, give full membership and include cideries. Cider is regulated like beer in a lot of states. So look at your cideries, because frequently they're able to do some work with orchards and other growers more locally than our brewers can. Also, honey is one that I found a lot of our breweries don't think about, and you can source really easily locally, and it's a nice way to collaborate. So just that's a new one I've thought about.
Yeah, honey's a pretty common locally sourced one, and then a lot of the, with some of the stouts, some of the other flavors that can go into some of those, and then the fall beers too. A lot of times it seems like a lot of those ingredients are coming local. And you mentioned cideries, Noreen. I will say we have worked with one cidery. We do have one certified cidery. From a technical assistance perspective, um, very, very pretty easy to work with, even more so than breweries, because they don't have the big boil part that is the big consumer of energy and a lot of water on the brewing side. Cideries, that they don't necessarily have that. They go right into the fermentation process right away. So um, very similar process, very easy to work with. If you've worked with breweries and you're familiar with that, going into a cidery is not going to be anything that's going to overwhelm or be something that surprises you.
Was that it for questions?
Yes, I believe so. That was our last question. So we'll turn
Yes,
it back over to Jenny to close it.
Yeah, I want to thank you all for attending. Everyone who's attended, you'll get an invitation from us for the next webinar that will be hosted. And following the next webinar, you'll have to register again. But following the next webinar is when we will drop our materials for you to use, and then we'll go into how to use them in the third and fourth webinars. So thank you so much for attending. Feel free to reach out to any of us. And if you have further questions until then, thank you for your time today. And thank you, Nick, Noreen, and Joe.